Good morning, my neighbours!
Well, good morning, you sexy mother hubbards. It's Sunday and it's time for an alternative paper review. First up to the Sunday Times. Tories may be left with fewer than 100 MPs. Oh, great. Yeah, now I've got to do the rest of the paper review with tadpoles swimming through the threads of my boxers. Because this is the story that a Times, Survation and Best for Britain poll of 15,000 prospective voters has revealed that the Conservatives at the coming general election could be left with less than 100 seats. So that's a cause for celebration, isn't it? And what I love about this poll is, like, for me, it completely dismantles the idea of this silent majority narrative. You know the silent majority narrative, don't you? It's like when Lee Anderson says something outrageous, or Suella Braverman demonises a whole group of people or whatever. Then people pipe up and they go like, oh, well, they're just speaking for the silent majority. Yeah, and if you speak for your subset of the electorate, then you're going woke. And go woke, go broke. It's you that speak for this sort of minimised subset. Then, of course, we take a suite of polling questions to a reflective group of people, of prospective voters, like you're going to see at the general election. And it reveals that, yeah, it's you guys that are actually trapped in an echo chamber. Like, this is what's so kind of crushingly hilarious about the modern Conservative Party, is they've got this group of, say, 100,000 baying, frothing, passionate supporters who love the direction that the Tories are going in. This kind of hard right, refugee demonisation thing. And they mistake that passion, that, the tweets, the Daily Express headlines, they mistake that as reflective of the mood of the nation. When in actual reality, most of the country just look at it and go, that's insanity over there. So we're just going to shrug and go this way. Meanwhile, over to the Sun, blah, 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 something about the Euros. I don't know. I mean, look, I don't want to dismiss or diminish a terror threat, if there is genuinely a threat of some sort of terror event taking place. But whenever there's a news story about potential chaos and disorder, and it's to do with an England football game, I'm a bit like, well, yeah. I mean, that's what you get with English football fans. You don't remember? Next, we go to the Mail on Sunday with Rayner attacks hypocrisy over jibe at the Prime Minister's wife. Now, I don't know how many of you are following this story because, I mean, look, I couldn't blame you if you completely dismissed it and walked in the other direction, right? Because it's being powered by people like Dan Hodges, who led everyone up the garden path with the Kears, Beers, Currygate thing, only for that story to embarrassingly deflate. And now they're kind of doing it again with Raina. Like, basically, the nuts and bolts are this. She lived in a house. It appears that she had that as her official residence. Meanwhile, she was kind of crashing with her boyfriend or her husband at the time over at this house. And there's a lot of hard right or male journalists or opportunistic Tory MPs who are like, well, so it sounds like you're being a bit crooked there. That sounds like corruption. Like it was a council house and she ended up selling it. She made a little bit of money off of it. So yeah, that's about the size of it. But it's being reported as though she's some sort of like corrupt, criminal, property baron billionaire. And it was raised first by the Daily Mail. It was put to police. The police said, yeah, there's no case to answer here. But that wasn't good enough for the Mail. So now the Mail are like, show us your tax returns, Ange. How about that? And now she's like, I'll tell you what, I'll show you my tax returns when the Prime Minister's wife publishes hers. When the Prime Minister publishes his American tax returns, which he's yet to publish. And so, yes, now the Mail are suddenly pearl-clutching about the prospect of political corruption. I mean, just bear in mind, right, like, just pan out. Bear in mind the context of all of this, of how Tory donor whip structure impacts and influences politics every day. You have a Tory donor who will write a cheque to CCHQ for something as little as £10,000, £20,000. And in return for that donation, they will get a contract for a government bit of work that he's doing that is worth like £50 million. It's insane levels of corruption. But the Daily Mail, the Tories and all of their cheerleaders will just be like, yeah, well, that's fine. But what has Ange done? Finally, over to The Observer, who cite outrage over extortionate rise of housing service charges. This is a story that, and look, I don't know if you guys have been impacted by this, but if you are a homeowner and you bought a place in the last 10 or 15 years, you may have been impacted by this new era that we've moved into now, where you buy a one-bed flat, it's part of a block, and then you have to pay an annual fee, or maybe on a monthly basis, to somebody to service that apartment block. Which is fine, I guess, you know, if you've got a concierge and you need somebody to come around and trim all of the plants and the bushes back. Maybe you've got a gym, maybe you've got car park security, but a lot of these people who are running these services and service charges are price gouging the tenants. And I'll tell you super quickly how, but this will enrage you. Like basically, when they build these flats, they take the service charge agreements for every single apartment and they box it up and that becomes an asset. And then that asset gets bought by investors who have to achieve 5% growth, 7% growth. And so year on year, it becomes more and more unaffordable. Plus, you get all of these hooky landlords and service charge agreement companies. Like, you could buy a flat that used to be just the upstairs floor of a house, right? So you just own the upstairs bit of what used to be a 2-up, 2-down house, right? But now the landlord who owns the freehold, like the bottom floor, the original house property, they now start signing the people who buy the one-bed flat to a service agreement. It's like, well, what am I getting for this money? Oh, well, it's industry practice. Right, but what? Like, are you actually doing any services? Are you tidying up the outside of it? Why am I paying you 12 grand a year? No, it's just an agreement. It's part of the part of the sale. And all of this completely goes back on that old traditional conservative ideal, doesn't it? About home ownership, about independence, about owning your plot. Because really what it is it's like taking the idea of home ownership and going like, oh, okay, well, you want to own your thing outright, right? Well, that's a cute idea, but actually, what you're doing is you're servicing your mortgage every month, right? So you're still paying out a huge chunk of money. Plus, we want you to pay a lease, right? You've got to keep renewing the lease every 25 years or 40 years or whatever. So there's that money as well. And now we want you to pay out these service charges every month or every year. It's basically taking the idea of home ownership and getting it as close to the instability of renting, isn't it? It's turning homeowners into tenants. But anyway, as I've pointed out, this goes against conservative ideals. It's a real pillar of conservatism, of Thatcherite conservatism. So you will be delighted to hear that the Conservatives have done and will do absolutely nothing to fix this. And do you know why? Because of that donor whip structure before, right? You know, the biggest donors to the modern Conservative Party? Housing development companies. So yeah, rest assured that if the conversation is about housing, property and corruption, that is a conversation that starts and finishes with Angela Rayner's house.